Aloha, and welcome back to Leaving the Church to Find God, your safe space for exploring faith beyond traditional walls. I'm your host, Melissa, and whether you grew up in the evangelical church like I did, or any other system while seeking answers, you're in the right place. This podcast isn't about judgment or attacking institutions. It's about honest conversations, diverse spiritual paths, and celebrating the unique journeys that we all take in search of meaning. We've all experienced indoctrination in some form, and here we explore how it shapes our understanding of ourselves and the divine. Each week, we'll dive into thought-provoking topics, share inspiring stories from guests and listeners like you, and offer tools and insights for navigating your own deconstruction journey. Remember, leaving the church doesn't mean leaving your faith. It's about finding your own authentic connection to something greater. So buckle up, embrace the open dialogue, and join me as we explore what it means to move beyond confines and discover the deeper personal connection to the divine that exists within us all. Aloha God Pod, welcome back. So today's episode I'm really excited to get into. It is something I've been teasing at it for a while. We're going to talk about spiritual bypassing. What is it? Why it's dangerous? You know, the difference between that and true surrender and inner work. So spiritual bypassing, by definition, it's referring to the spiritual practices that we use to avoid addressing emotional pain, unresolved trauma, or personal growth. And this is really common in the church and in the spiritual realm for a lot of reasons. That, at the core of it, when we start doing the real work and resolving these traumas and doing our shadow work, which we talked about, a couple of episodes ago. It was the last episode of season 1. When we start doing this inner work, then the indoctrination starts to unravel on its own. We find our own inner power, and we're not reliant on these outside sources for that. So, of course, the outside sources that want you reliant on them are going to keep you bypassing, your real work to keep you reliant on what they have to offer, right? And it can look a lot of different ways. I know that when, things would come up in the church, it was like, oh, just pray on it. God's got everything under control. Everything happens for a reason. There's a lot of that. And especially if someone is reaching out, wanting to go to therapy. I know in my own family and relationships within the church, that's a big thing. If somebody's thinking about going to therapy, then they've pretty much given up on God, right? And if you have real faith, then you just take it to God. Take it to God and let God take care of it. And while there is some truth to this, state of surrender, it is meant to be more of a deepening of the work that you're already doing, not a way to bypass the work that you're doing. The same with meditation or, breath work. Breath work really does help you go deep within. And, I'm such a big fan of it. But if you are using these things, or ayahuasca, psilocybin, cannabis, all of these tools that can be used to deepen your spiritual work, if you're using them to bypass doing the actual trauma work, the deep work, the shadow work, then that's all it is. You're bypassing. And no matter how spiritual or how deep you get into that, that base is still going to be there. It's still going to be there in your subconscious, operate ruling the way that you operate, controlling your life. And so it is important to have spiritual practices in place that help you deepen your relationship with yourself and your relationship with the divine, and whatever that looks like for you. But it is not a substitute for facing your shadows, man. The truth is in your shadows. I won't stop saying it. So that's, in a nutshell, what spiritual bypassing is about. And so we're going to go a little deeper into this and what you can do to actually get in and do the work. Again, I'm going to keep referring you to season 1, episode 25 about spiritual bypassing. About shadow work, because that's where it's at, right? It's all in the shadow work. And there's so many different ways to do shadow work, internal family systems, and through journaling and working with a therapist. There's the EMDR. There's all of these different tools to actually do the work, but we're going to talk about now what spiritual bypassing is, so you know how to recognize it and how to kind of get in and do the work yourself. the real work, not just the bypassing work. And so we've done, I did the 3 episodes on body, mind, spirit, the embodiment, the soul-led living, and the mindfulness. And if you haven't listened to those, I do like what I'm talking about today is going to build on a lot of what's already been discussed in season 1. So yes, you can still get a lot out of this if you haven't been through season 1, but I also encourage you to go back and listen because there's a lot of foundation that I've been building up to get to this conversation. And, first, we're going to talk about magical thinking. Magical thinking is a common term used in psychology, and it refers to how unresolved trauma can lead us to just waiting for someone to rescue us, whether that be God or our higher self, whatever you believe in, whether it be another person, an institution, money, that this one thing is going to happen and it's going to come and save us. And believing that like positive thinking or spiritual rituals, prayer alone is going to fix everything. And the reality of that is that our higher self is always leading us to where we want to be. But we came here and developed all this baggage because it's giving us the tools that we need. Working through those things gives us the tools that we need to live the life that we came here to live. It's all part of the process, the lessons, the breakdowns, the breakthroughs, the growth, the going backwards. It's all part of what we came here to experience as human. It's all part of the evolution of our soul, and which is the evolution of consciousness, right? Or it's all one. We're all connected. So we get these lessons and then to just skip those things and be like, oh, this was ugly and this was painful, so I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go to the thing that makes me feel better, which is believing that there is something outside of myself that can rescue me from these awful feelings, memories, this stuckness in my life, these repeated patterns. That's when you're bypassing. And this magical thinking leaves us thinking, oh, if I just get in alignment, or if I just pray enough, if I just meditate enough, if I just keep it positive and love and light and all of that, then it's going to magically be okay. And the thing about this that's so dangerous is it does make us feel better temporarily, but the problems will keep coming back. I've been in deep relationship with people who have been on, deep plant medicine journeys with ayahuasca and such, and they'll swear by it. Oh, all you need to do is go do some ayahuasca and it'll fix everything. And my response is always, I'm not something to be fixed. I am experiencing life and I'm processing what has happened so that I can grow from it and continue to move forward and expand in my consciousness, in my life, to be the best human that I can be. And by best, I don't mean by somebody else's standards. I mean by my own standards, by what my soul wants to be, what I came here to be, what my soul wanted to experience in this life. But we get stuck from experiencing these things because we just keep bypassing. And the ayahuasca journey or these plant medicine journeys can be really powerful. I'm sure I have not done ayahuasca. I have not ever felt called to do it. Actually, quite the opposite. I don't know if it's just the idea of vomiting for hours because there's nothing I hate more than vomiting. But if it's that, or if it's just because my soul doesn't want it, is also, there's a lot of appropriation in it. We don't have to go into that right now. But I've never felt called to ayahuasca, but I have been on other plant medicine journeys with psilocybin, with LSD, with cannabis, and I found them to be very helpful. But there's a difference when you're using them to try to reach this state of consciousness without working through the human parts first, or when you work through the human parts and you're using these tools to deepen that work. That's a very big distinction. Am I bypassing or am I deepening? And I can say from experience, for years and years, I bypassed. I used cannabis as a tool. I also used it to self-medicate with my neurodivergence and anxiety and stress and depression and so many things. And I love cannabis. I think it's a beautiful, amazing, wonderful plant. I love everything about it. And for many years, decades, I used it to bypass, to get myself in this enlightened state without actually doing the deep work. And there was a point in my therapy in this, dealing with these unresolved traumas, where I had to take a break or step away from it because it wasn't allowing me to reach the depths that I was trying to go to. And I knew that as long as it kept making everything feel okay, that I wouldn't face these deep, deep shadows that I needed to face. And I do still use it recreationally, like for fun, or if I really need to, if I'm socially or whatever. Sometimes it just makes me like a total hermit. It overthinks everything. It doesn't want to be around anybody. So I really just kind of listen to my intuition on that. But I also use it to deepen. If I have something that I'm working through and I've worked through it and I feel like I've done the shadow work on it, but I want to deepen my understanding, then I can use cannabis for that. And it really opens my third eye, connects me to my higher self, and I get a lot of like intuitive downloads as long as I'm not overusing it. It only works for me like that if it's used occasionally. If I use it every day, then I kind of get numbed out to it. But so those are ways that, that's kind of the difference between using these things to bypass or to deepen. And it's the same with prayer or meditation or breath work. If I'm just using it to soothe, it's like putting a Band-Aid on something or treating the symptom of something without getting to the root cause. And that's essentially what bypassing is. It's treating the symptoms, right? It's like the pharmaceutical industry of our soul. So there is, I'm not discouraging any of these tools that I will talk about and mention. Many of them I actually encourage in the right situations, a situation that feels right for you. I'm not the one that gets to determine that, but I am just bringing them right now in the context of today's conversation. It's about how they're used to bypass. So please don't take any of this as me saying this is bad or I don't believe you should do it. Not that what I think you should do should matter anyway, but that's not what this is about. This is just about pointing out how these tools can be used to bypass instead of doing your shadow work, doing the actual work. And I'm going to keep talking about shadow work. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, go back to season 1, episode 25. It was the last episode of the first season, just like 3 episodes ago, I believe. And I go deeper into shadow work, but, and there's so many ways to do that, but without doing that inner work, it's not gonna, you're just gonna be putting your life on hold. Your growth, your expansion is just gonna be putting on hold because you're by literally skipping the part that your soul wants to do by numbing it out or by reaching these spiritual states as a temporary relief. And again, like magical thinking is this belief that something's going to come and save you, something outside of yourself. It's the same with, again, meditation, with plant medicine, with prayer, with, prayer requests and all of this. It's inviting something outside of yourself to do something that is inner work, and nothing but you can do your inner work. It's just not possible. I mean, it's your job. That's your kuleana. That's what you're here for. It's your responsibility as a human to do your inner work. And we build up these traumas and we have these experiences in our life. It's not because something happened to us. I truly do believe everything happens for a reason. But if we don't get to the root of what that reason is, then we're not learning anything from it. Just saying everything happens for a reason or everything is happening for my highest and greatest good. Yes, those things are true. But if you're just saying that because you don't want to look at the ugly, you're bypassing. Figure out why, ask your soul, why is this happening? What am I meant to learn from this? Show me the lesson. Because until we learn the lessons, we're just going to keep repeating them over and over again. And it's not like, I have to earn my place in evolution or in expansion through learning lessons. No, it's what we came here to do. It's part of our human journey is the contrast. And through contrast, we find expansion. When we experience what we don't want, the other side of it is what we do want. That's that shadow light side, right? So it's about getting to the root causes of things and not treating the symptoms. This is really common in the church. Again, when I know from my experience, when people would talk about going to therapy, like, therapists are, worldly or, all of this like bad, like demon, whatever, it's just like outside of God. No, you got to trust God. Go to your pastor who has zero training on anything psychological whatsoever. It's like, no, you take it to God, take it to the church. You don't need to go anywhere else. And that keeps us disempowered because we're not doing the real work. We're still, again, relying on something outside of ourselves to give us relief instead of going deep and facing these inner demons and resolving them so that we can move forward and expand in our life. And, even if something could, I know we think like, oh, I would love to win the lottery and never have to worry about this again. Or I would love to have meet this partner that's going to just make me feel loved and safe. And I never have to like feel alone again. There's all of these ways that we can reach outside of ourselves for relief. But the reality is we need these experiences in order to grow. And so like a butterfly in chrysalis, right? The caterpillar goes into chrysalis and it literally turns into goo, a primordial goo. Everything about it dissolves inside of this cocoon, completely mush. There's nothing left to it. And then it's rebuilt as this butterfly. But the thing is if a butterfly is breaking through its cocoon and you help it, it will die. Because it needs the strength that's built in breaking through the cocoon in order to fly. And I feel like that is such a beautiful metaphor to doing this work, because if somebody saves us from it, if somebody breaks open our cocoon that we're working so hard to fight through, then we're not going to have the strength that we would have built in breaking through that ourselves to live the life that we want to live. I know myself, I have this vision of this life for myself where I'm making a huge impact. And I'm building this empire, this decolonized life and empire and impact on the world. But all of these challenges that have come my way and that I've dealt with, sure, it would have felt great for something to come and rescue me from them. But the amount of fortitude and resilience and strength and security within myself that I have built in the process is necessary, because I am doing huge things. And in order to be able to face the adversity that it comes with doing those huge things, in order to be able to face myself, to be able to face all of the challenges that are going to come along the way, I've had to build the strength to be able to endure that. I've had to face the rejection, because I know that, with success comes haters, right? And the more successful you become, the more haters you have. Well, if I reach this huge success overnight and I haven't done this inner work to have a strong sense of self, to know who I am outside of other people's opinions and acceptance and popularity, then it would crush me. All of the negative feedback, negative comments, whatever would crush me, because I wouldn't be prepared for it. But because of the fighting through all of these difficult situations, I've built the fortitude that whatever is coming towards me, I can handle. When I have great wealth, I'm not going to live in fear of losing it, because I know what it's like to live with nothing. You see what I'm saying? It's like we have to build these skills to reach this life that we want to live, not as a way of earning it, not as a way of proving ourselves, but because we literally need to build the skills in order to handle these things that we're asking for in life. I could reach, and I did when I was younger. I've had some gnarly romantic relationships, y'all. Had some gnarly romantic relationships. That was a lot of trauma, a lot of baggage, right? A lot of lessons that I just kept having to learn over and over again. But I remember at one point, the best partner that I've had in my life, he was kind, he was loving, he adored me, he would do anything for me. Was he perfect? No, he was not perfect. And no, that obviously wasn't my person. He's actually passed away since then. But I couldn't appreciate him because I hadn't been with enough men to realize what I didn't want. I hadn't been with enough men to show me all of these broken parts within myself. Not broken, but these parts that needed to be healed, these parts that needed my attention. And I gave those parts my attention because of the disastrous breakups and relationships that I went through. It forced me to go deep within and to do the inner work, so that now if someone like Jeremy were to show up and pour their love on me and be present and be emotionally available, now I know how to appreciate that, and I know how to meet it with my own emotional availability. But it took all of the breakdown in order for me to go within and have the breakthrough to become the person who's able to receive that kind of love. So I hope I'm really getting to this. Why do we do this? Why do we bypass? We've talked about this before. It's because we're programmed as humans to avoid discomfort. Pain would often lead to our demise, in early human days and in our evolution. When you when you touch fire and it burns, you move away from the fire, and then you know to stay away from fire, right? It's that kind of thing. It's that fear of pain, and like, no, I'm going to avoid that because that will hurt me. And so we often avoid our shadow work and our emotional healing because it's overwhelming and it's frightening. And when these things are buried, it's like when your body's detoxifying. Like your liver and all of your organ, like these collector organs, I don't know the collector, but processing organs, they have these free radicals, this toxins, this stuff that's there. And when you start supporting your body in cleansing that out, and I'm not a big, like, we're not going to get into that, but just when you start to cleanse your body, you can often go through what's called a healing crisis because your body is now experiencing all of these things at once as it gets rid of them. So it was hiding in your body. And then when you're treating it and you're pulling it out, you have to feel it again. And it's uncomfortable. That doesn't mean that something's going wrong. It actually means that something's going right. Well, it's the same with our inner work. When we've got these things buried in our subconscious, buried in our body, literally in our bodies, and we've kind of built up our defenses around them and they're buried and we think we're good, even though they're completely ruling our lives, but they're deep down in there. But when we start bringing attention to them and start looking at these parts of us that are hurting, we have to feel that pain. We have to feel that discomfort. And because we're conditioned to avoid pain and discomfort, we don't want to do that. We're going to avoid it in every way we can. And that's where bypassing comes in. It also happens with like a lot of religious and societal teachings. It emphasizes this external salvation over internal transformation. For me, I believe that is part of the design of oppression, whether it was a conscious design or if it's just in the energy of the design. I can't say that. I'm not the one who designed it, but I do believe that that is an intentional part of the design to keep us stuck, to keep us from reaching our full potential, to keep us from uniting as souls and evolving and expanding at the rate that we would like to, because that would keep those who oppress in power. From being in power. They would lose their power if we found our own. And the way to find our power is to go through the trenches, is to go through the shadows. On the other side of the shadow is your light. And if they can keep us out of our shadows and keep us afraid of our shadows and ashamed of our shadows, then we're never going to look at them and we're never going to reach that light. So then they can maintain their power over us. We still need them. We still need to consume. We still need all of this external validation because we haven't been able to face those shadows on our own, and we're terrified of facing them. So there's a lot of social conditioning around it. It's not just our own internal fear. It's also been like conditioned into us. And again, this shame and vulnerability, it's a barrier to this inner work. It prevents people from facing their perceived flaws because, especially as children, we're punished for being flawed or conceived as flawed. We don't pay attention in class the way we're supposed to, or we don't follow all of these rigid, rules that are given to us. And we kind of live our wild and free lives as children. And it is conditioned out of us to fit into these norms and to be easy for our parents. And I feel like parents are getting more and more aware, hopefully, as we evolve. People are getting more and more aware as we evolve, but especially those of us who had boomer parents, there was a lot of like physical abuse, a lot of our parents just seriously bypassing working all the time. A lot of us were latchkey kids. And so we were expected to fall in line. And if we didn't fall in line, it caused problems. It caused problems for our parents who were overworked and tired and hadn't done their work. It caused problems for our teachers who were the same. It caused problems for everyone. So we were conditioned to fall in line. And anything that didn't fall in line with what made things easy or convenient was considered flawed or bad or naughty. And we were shamed for those things and we were punished for those things. So that shame really gets buried in the subconscious. It becomes a trauma, and we're afraid to look at these parts of ourselves that we perceive as flawed because of that shame. and that guilt that is around it. And there's a vulnerability to that when you get into this inner work and you really start dealing with these wounded parts of yourself, of the inner child and the inner teenager and just all of it. When you start looking at these inner parts, it's very vulnerable because those parts felt so helpless and they felt so flawed because of all the shame and the punishment that was, came along with it. So in the church, this can look like, pray about it, give it to the Lord, trust God, have faith. It's all going to be okay. And again, while those things are true, it's okay when we do the inner work, right? But then also in this spiritual guru world, there's the high vibe movement of just be positive, think positive thoughts. And again, yes, those things work once you've done the inner work. But if you're keeping yourself in positive thoughts and something awful is happening, you're like, it's okay, this is happening for my highest and greatest good, but you haven't done the inner work to build that belief, then it's not doing what you think it's doing. When you've done the inner work and you've done your shadow work and you've really, really developed a state of surrender and trust, then that works to remind your human. When your human starts to worry and fall back into those patterns, that really helps to remind yourself, this is all happening for my highest and greatest good. I don't see the purpose in it right now, but I know that I'm going to turn this into something beautiful. That's alchemy. That's something I talk about often, right? Is alchemizing the pain and turning it into something beautiful, turning it into something powerful. But if you haven't done the inner work, you're just fighting against these parts of yourselves that have these beliefs that are going to keep you returning to these patterns over and over again. A lot of spiritual leaders capitalize on this, on bypassing. They offer surface level solutions and you have to keep coming back to them rather than promoting genuine transformation. Like, buy this course, do this course. Oh, well, you did that and you learned, but you haven't gotten in alignment. So now you need this course, or you need to do this thing, or buy this book and listen to this thing. And again, there's so many helpful tools out there. There's so many courses and books that have helped me tremendously. But without doing that shadow work, without facing those wounded parts of myself, it's just piling stuff on. It's just avoiding the reality. I apologize. My neighbor's cat, calling my part-time kitty, is in here. If you hear him meowing, I've tried to put him out. He meows. Have him inside. He's meowing. He's just really needing a lot of attention today. As long as these teachers, and a lot of them believe it because they haven't even done their own inner work. They believe it because they have found this level of numbness and level of success that they believe what they're selling. And a lot of them, they don't even have the layers of trauma. They have a lot of privilege, emotional privilege, financial privilege, familial, whatever their privileges are, that they don't even understand that there's people that have healing work that has to be done before these tools work and have any real effect on their lives. And some of them know it and they use it to capitalize and to make money off of you. As long as you're reaching for something outside of yourself, they can keep selling you that thing that you need. But when you find that within yourself, nobody can sell you anything that you don't need. You can decide for yourself. You can use your intuition and listen to your own inner guidance and be like, oh, that sounds really expansive and fun, and I would like to experience that thing. So then you go for it. But that's coming. Can you feel the difference in that vibe? That comes from an entirely different place. And this is part of the reason why, one of the many reasons why it's so important to have your own discernment, to have a strong relationship with yourself and with your inner guidance and your intuition, because then you can kind of see the difference and you can feel the difference. And like, if it feels expansive, and even if you haven't done a lot of inner work, I can just give you a hint, and I'll talk about this over and over again. If it feels expansive, that's a great sign. That's a big yes. If it feels contracting, that's a big no. And if you can't feel the expansive or the contracting, then we go into embodiment. Then we need to work on our embodiment and being able to feel what our body's telling us. I have a whole episode on that called embodiment. So because what is it and how to do it? I don't remember the exact title, but easy to find. Go in the backlog, embodiment, listen to it. When we've really got that embodiment, then we can feel it in our bodies. Glennon Doyle described it the other day as, does it feel warm or does it feel cold? That's such a great way to think about it, because it really does. When you are in an expansive state and your soul is like, yes, then it does it. There's this warmth that comes from it. And when it is in a contracting state and it's pulling you away from that inner knowing and that what your soul says yes to, there's a coolness, a coldness to it. It doesn't have that emotional warmth, that feeling of warmth. So it's important to develop discernment in these things. So, is this going to be bypassing, or is this actually going to help me do the work that I need to do? And it's important to, again, build a strong sense of self before, deep diving into this spiritual work. And because without a strong sense of self, we risk falling into new spiritual traps that keep us from our inner truth. And that's what happened with me. I left the church and moved 6,000 miles away to Hawaii, where it's a lot of spiritual guru, wellness, all of that stuff. And I was really attracted to that. But it was just jumping from one thing to another thing, because I hadn't built that sense of self yet. And, it was 2 decades in the church, 2 decades in the spiritual world almost, before I really got deep and started doing my shadow work and doing the deep inner work and building a strong sense of self. So I was easily succumbed to others' guidance. I mean, I did have some resistance because of falling for everything I had fallen for in the church. There was a bit of a defense there that a lot of the charlatans and the woo-woo, I was like, meh, no, thank you. And I have a strong intuition. I've always had a strong intuition. So a lot of it I stayed away from, but I also like the sneakier ones, or the ones that are great once you've done the work, wasn't so obvious to me. And I totally just was in this like, how do I keep repeating the same patterns? I stay positive. I meditate. I've done all of this spiritual healing work. I've read 1 million books, and I get being in the present moment and Eckhart Tolle and all the things. Like, why am I still repeating these same patterns? Why am I still not fulfilled? And it's because I hadn't gone inside and built a strong sense of self and done this inner work, healed these wounded parts, giving them my attention, accepted them, loved them, so that I could be a whole self going into these spiritual practices. So how do we build that strong inner self? How do we build that strong sense of self? And we do it by exploring our values, our boundaries, and our emotional awareness, facing our shadows. Grounding techniques that help us stay present when we're doing inner work, doing somatic work, moving this stuff out of the body, because you can deal with the mind all day long. You can deal with the soul all day long. If you're not dealing with your body, then it's, you're not going to get that whole holistic approach. You're not going to get that holistic healing that you're looking for, that holistic, or I guess just the wholeness that you're looking for. And the same with the others. You can do all of the embodiment work and all the spiritual work. And if you're not, dealing with the mind part of it, then you're not getting the wholeness, and, all the way around. So practicing grounding techniques it's really helpful. There's a lot of those. I love doing these little meditations. So I'm going to do a little meditation to help you get grounded, to stay present during your inner work. I will link it in the description, and it'll be on YouTube later today. Cultivating self-compassion as a foundation for healing. I've mentioned this before. I will mention it over and over again. Kristen Neff does this work on mindful self-compassion. There's a mindful self-compassion workbook. Highly recommend. It is not bypassing. It is shadow work. It is not bypassing. It is shadow work. It is part of the shadow work. The mindful self-compassion workbook, I cannot recommend it enough. If you feel judgy of other people, if you feel judgy of yourself, if you're often critical of the world around you and how it's operating, mindful self-compassion, yes, do it. The workbook's amazing. She also has a book called Fierce Self-Compassion. You can listen if you're more of a listen to the book kind of person. But I recommend the workbook because it forces you to do the journaling and do the reflection and going deep, and it's so powerful. But yes, self-compassion is really important in doing this work, because, it's like beating someone down. Imagine a child, and you've insulted them, and you've punished them, and you've been cold to them, and all of these things. There's not trust there. So then you do some healing and you try to go back and offer them healing. You offer them love. They're not going to be able to receive that because you haven't built trust there. So we have to build trust with our inner self, and self-compassion work is a huge way of doing that. So here's some signs of recognizing spiritual bypassing in yourself. Avoiding accountability by blaming low vibrations or blaming other people for your state of being. Overusing like spiritual jargon or ideas to dismiss difficult emotions. Feeling stuck despite engaging in spiritual practices. If you've done the ayahuasca and you've done the prayer and you've done all the things and you still feel stuck, like that's a really good sign that you've been bypassing and not doing the actual like shadow work, the deep work. There's some questions you can ask yourself to kind of find out if that's what's happening. It's like, am I avoiding something difficult by focusing on meditation? Am I avoiding something difficult by focusing on plant medicine? Am I avoiding something difficult by focusing on prayer and turning it over to God? Asking yourself, like, before you take part in a spiritual practice to find relief, am I avoiding something difficult? And if so, you're leading yourself into the trap of bypassing. If not, you're like, no, I know what this is coming from. I can see the pattern. I can see where it's at. Now I'm going to use this spiritual practice to deepen that understanding and to integrate that understanding within myself. There's the difference. Can you hear that difference? Let me know. Leave me a comment. Send me a message. Can you hear that difference? What emotions or patterns keep resurfacing for you, even after you've done spiritual work? Again, like I was talking about, I did this 20 years of reading books and all the spiritual practices and yoga and all the things, but I still kept finding myself in the same situations. Like, what patterns keep showing up? Like, okay, I've been praying about this and taking this to God for 40 years, and I'm still here. Maybe you're bypassing something. just an idea. So, there's this shadow work. I will keep going back to it. It's so important to embrace both our light and our shadow for true growth. We are a whole human being. There are all these parts of us, and we can't embrace the light side because it feels good and shun the darkness or pretend it doesn't exist and still experience our wholeness. In order to experience our wholeness, to experience the wholeness of anything, we have to embrace its light and its dark. That is the whole, right? It's the yin and the yang. There is no, nothing has just one side. Everything has a shadow side. Everything has a shadow side. Inner child work. Address, how reconnecting and nurturing your inner child supports your healing. Like, address these wounds, address this pain, these memories, this coldness of places where there's not memories, but you feel like maybe there should be. Like, address these parts of yourself. If you're doing something and you're like, oh, a part of me feels like this, even though I know this, there's this part of me that still is hurting. Or even though I've done all of this stuff, there's this part of me that doesn't understand. That is literally a part of you. There's so many parts of ourselves. If you look into internal family systems, it's a great approach to this type of shadow work. But we all have these parts of ourselves that develop as a result of shame or punishment, guilt. I've talked about that before a few times in the podcast. Like, these parts of ourselves get exiled and put into the shadows. We don't want to look at them. We feel like they're unacceptable. But when we address and reconnect and nurture these inner child parts, then we can be a whole self that moves forward and breaks free of these patterns. And then we can use these beautiful, wonderful spiritual tools to deepen our life, to deepen our connection to self, to deepen our connection to others, to deepen our relationship with the divine, to create a life that we truly love and believe in and feel excited to wake up and live. Work with that inner child, work with those parts. There are some, of course, practical tools. I wouldn't be me if I didn't leave you with some practical tools. Therapy. A lot of people's like, oh, I've tried therapy. It's not for me. Then you didn't have the right therapist. There's so many different types of therapy. There's so many different types of therapists. And it's just like dating. You're not necessarily going to find the right fit on the first date. And some people do. They go, their high school sweetheart, their middle school sweetheart. It's their person for life. Lucky them. For most of us, it takes some trial and error, right? We got to meet different people, see different methods work better for each of us. So find your right fit. Find your right therapist. If you prefer to go through the coaching or mentor route, make sure that you're working with someone who is licensed and trained as a therapist, who is trauma informed, because a lot of coaches will bring out this trauma, and then you're stuck and you don't have the tools to process it, and it can make things worse. So if you're afraid of the word therapy or therapist, like, that's the part that, I suggest working on going into that shadow. But finding someone who has experience in this and that can support you, not your pastor. There's nothing wrong with your pastor. Sure, they're a great person. Actually, I'm not sure of that. They may be a great person, but your pastor is not going to get you there. Your pastor is not going to be able to unlock these parts for you or help you and give you the codes that you need to be able to see these shadows, because they're trained to bypass. They're trained to show you how to bypass. They're trained to keep you looking for something and depending on something outside of yourself. And reward yourself. Reward yourself for every breakthrough. Like, celebrate yourself. Do a little dance. Give yourself a big hug, a pat on the back. Put your hands on your face. Give yourself some encouragement. Tell yourself how proud you are. Look yourself in the mirror and say affirming things to yourself. Give yourself some love. Take yourself out for ice cream. Whatever feels like a good reward for you. Go for a walk in nature. But whatever you need to do to give some positive reinforcement to this inner child, to these shadow parts, to keep yourself going, do it. Don't use it to bypass. Don't eat the ice cream so you don't have to feel the feelings. Feel the feelings and then eat the ice cream as a reward, right? And the inner work itself is rewarding. It leads you to living an authentic life with deeper connections and greater peace, right? And happiness is great. We all experience happiness. We all experience sadness, but happiness isn't the goal. Peace is the goal. Inner peace is the goal. From a place of inner peace, we can really reach our true potential. We can really develop true, deep connections and relationship with ourselves and with others, with the world around us. With the divine is all the same. It's all the divine, right? So that is a reward within itself, but it's okay to give yourself little rewards along the way. So just to kind of recap, we're going to talk about, again, the dangers of spiritual bypassing. It keeps us stuck. It keeps us spinning our wheels. It can be very expensive. It can be at the expense of our health, of our mental health, of our relationships, our relationship to ourself. It keeps us from finding that true self, our true authenticity, from which we can live our greatest, most expansive version of life. It's so important to do this inner work. It's so important to integrate the spirituality with emotional healing. I'm not saying it's one or the other, but we have to do the emotional healing and integrate within that all of the spiritual work, right? Use it to deepen, not to bypass. And y'all, this takes time. True healing takes time, and it takes courage. The journey is worth it, 100%, 100%. But I know that in the trenches, in the depths of it, sometimes it doesn't feel that way. But I encourage you to keep going. Thank you for being here. I'm so proud of you for listening to this conversation. I'm so proud of you for showing up episode after episode, for showing up for yourself, for listening to these things, even if they're uncomfortable. You're doing amazing. I love you. You're awesome. I appreciate you. I invite you to reflect on your own practices and begin exploring this deeper work. There are so many resources and tools available. You're always welcome to reach out to me. I answer my DMs. If you hit me up on Instagram at authenticallymelly, I will respond to you. You can find me through my site at liveallow.com, ALAU. It's for the alchemy of authenticity, liveallow.com. There's a contact me form in there. Please don't put in the form, I'm contacting you, or something generic. It helps me to know, like, how I can help you or how I can approach the conversation. I have people contacting me from the marketplace. I have people contacting me for my photography services, for breath work, for mentoring, for website. Like there's so many things that I offer under this umbrella. So if you fill out the contact form, please let me know what it's for, what you're interested in. You don't have to go deep, but just give me a hint into what we're talking about. That way I can find the best way to support you. And I kind of know what I'm getting into or what to expect. And so many resources, so many tools. The Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook, hit it up. There's so much more to get into. There's so many ways that we're going to continue to grow and expand and use all of these other tools. But first, I'm inviting you to don't use them to bypass, to get into that shadow work, to do this stuff. And I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. If you're still listening, please subscribe to this podcast. Leave me a 5-star review. I can't explain to you how much it helps. It helps reach a wider audience. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, share with somebody who you think will appreciate this. I'm doing all of this just pro bono. I'm doing it myself. It takes work. It takes financial resources. It takes a lot. And the more support you give, if you don't have financial resources to contribute with a review, contribute with a follow, with a share. All of that helps me grow to where I can eventually be compensated for this, which would be really helpful because, we need money. We live in a capitalistic society. It is what it is. And also, I appreciate your messages and your encouragement and the text for the people who know me and the DMs. And it feels so good to know that this is making an impact. And for me, it's great because I love doing this work and it feels expansive and it fills my cup. But it also really helps to have encouragement to know that it's not falling on deaf ears and that it is making an impact in your lives. I love you. I'll see you next week, or you'll hear me next week, depending on where you're finding me. Have an awesome day. Stay authentic. Aloha. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your support is to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, share your thoughts by leaving a 5-star review. It really helps more people to find this space. Want to go deeper? Head over to my website at leavingthechurchtofindgod.com. There, you can make a donation and make sure that we continue to have these conversations. No matter where you are on your spiritual journey, if you or someone you know would like to join the podcast and tell your story, please reach out to me on Instagram at authenticallymelly. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep finding your own unique connection to something greater. Until next time, stay authentic, stay open, and aloha.